and welcome to Side Streets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. I am your host, Angela Chen, and just in case you are looking for an opportunity to host your own show here on IntellectualRadio.com, please do not hesitate to call 708-223-8953. And I want to welcome back Mr. Elvis Slaughter, my former superintendent and now current author of Safer Jail and Prison Matters, along with four other books, and one is currently in the works right now.
That's correct. It's titled Preschool to Prison.
Preschool to Prison. And so we did speak early in the week about what we would be talking about on today. And we want to touch on the base of this new gang. And this is not to highlight it, but just to inform our listeners and viewers of what it's like working in a correctional facility. This new thing called the savage life or gang. Can you expound on that?
Well, first, let me thank you for inviting me to your show once again. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you.
One thing I forgot to mention last time I was here, that all of my books are available on Amazon.com. Just go there and type in Elvis Slaughter and you'll see a list of my books. A total of 7. Preschool and Prison Matter will be my 8th book. As you mentioned, savage. Is that a gang or none? First, I want to ask you, does it fit the definition of a gang?
Well, it doesn't necessarily fit the title in and of itself does not fit the image of a gang. However, my take on is that anything goes with this particular group of young men.
Now, I'm quite sure that the department has came up with some strategies to deal with this so-called savage issue. My question is this: looking at the stats, which I don't have there been any decrease in their activities?
No, as a matter of fact, the activity has increased significantly. And it, from what my understanding was initially not supposed to have been against the officers. However, that mindset has changed, and now there is an attack on officers. Not just, it used to be a time when female officers were off limits.
I remember that.
With this particular gang, any and everything goes.
Well, let me give you a few facts. Since 2012, there have been estimated 30,700 gangs in the U.S. Eliminate a gang, if that's what you want to call it, it's not that easy. It appears to me, and this is only opinion, and I'm quite sure you're giving your opinion, that these are gangs, and what their activities are more of a nuisance. Am I correct?
Well, initially they were considered somewhat of a nuisance. Now they have become extremely violent. So it's not even more of a nuisance. It's more about the overall safety of officers as well as those that have been entrusted in our care. So it's more of a nuisance. It's more of a pandemic, if you will.
Would you say they are sane or insane?
I will say that there are some mental incapacities that exist for some of the activity that they participate in. So that is also a part of the equation. So we talk about comorbidity. So particularly what you see is not what you get until you get to the core of it. Okay. So there's a culmination of many things that exist with this particular group.
According to an author by the name of Ford in 2015, he wrote an article about mental health and mental illness, and he estimated there are over 400,000 inmates that suffer from mental illness in the U.S. alone. Apparently, these type of issues are not just located in Chicago or Cook County. They're all over the country and maybe all over the world. But there has been some studies, and believe it or not, this is not so much new. It's probably new to DOC and Cook County. But a guy by the name of S. Grishin, Grassin, he did a study back in 1983 about these same issues. He also did another study in 2006, and they both are cited in my book, Safer Jail and Prison Matters. And the articles were published in the American Journal of Psychiatry about the psychopathological effects of solitary confinement. What he did was he evaluated over 100 inmates in states and federal prison and came up with a conclusion and recommendation on how to treat these type of individuals. In my opinion, I think the same thing, if any department is having similar issues, they should take similar steps. Not only take the steps that were done by this author, but also do their own evaluation of the inmates and see what kind of conclusion and recommendation they could come up with. I'm not saying that nothing been done, but you indicated that it has increased. So I think that something should be looked at least from the evidence-based research. Like I say, this is not new. If you go to a place called Rikers Island, they have like over 10,000 inmates. And if you think you're having problems in Cook County, go to Rikers Island, okay? Yes. That's right. Some that, like I say, it's sad what is happening, and it should not be condoned, and some should be done about it. Now, what to do? I don't have a magic ball and say this is what you should do, but I can tell you that there are research out there that could direct you in the right direction on what to do and how to do it. If only you take those steps. I'm not saying the steps have not been taken. Also, there's a prison in North Carolina, and they got some real serious issues. They have what you call savage inmates as well. Just a few days ago, 2 inmates killed 4 inmates in 30 minutes.
Wow.
Right. So the point I'm trying to make, this is fact, this is the news. The point I'm trying to say is that, yeah, you have problems, but we just hope they never get to that extreme.
Now, let me interject for a second. For those that are listening to the subject matter here on today's show, understand that it's not an attempt to condone any behavior that has been done, but we want to give you insight on what correctional officers have to deal with on a daily basis and the dangers that we encounter every single day we get up. Just like you guys want to go home after you've done your 9 to 5, so do we. And we want to make sure that the way we came is the way that we leave. Not particularly highlighting some of the behaviors, but can we talk about some of the behaviors that they exhibit and that they partake in? But before we do that, we're going to take just a quick musical break and come back to Side Streets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. You want to hear about the savage life. Welcome back to Sidestreets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. Just to remind you that Sidestreets and Intersections is an iHeart radio station, so please feel free to download the app. Also, I can be heard on Spreaker, YouTube, and of course, Facebook Live. Getting back to my special guest, once again, this is part two of understanding or trying to get an insight on safer jail and prisons matters. Now, prior to us taking the musical break, we were beginning to talk about this gang called the Savage Gang. Now, at my current place of employment, they call themselves the Savage Life. So, not that we're highlighting, and let us make sure that we express that here at intellectualradio.com, as well as Side Streets and Intersections, that we're not condoning any of the behavior, but only to give you insight as to what your loved ones face every day when they go into work in correctional settings. Mr. Slaughter, let's talk about some of the behavior.
Okay, because I don't have any facts about their behavior, so my opinion is just my opinion.
Absolutely.
In Safer Jail and Prison Matters, in chapter 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, and 16, which is reducing violence, controlling gangs, classification, managing mental ills, the effect of long-term isolation and rehabilitation, those chapters can help you deal with some of the behavior. It's not a fix-up, but it would put you in the right direction. I don't really know about the behavior, but I do know if they were what you call long-term isolation, it does cause several behavior of that kind. Can you tell the audience some of the types of behavior that you have experienced?
For starters, there is rampant exhibiting behaviors of masturbation publicly. It is just so common practice now. This was the thing when I started some 19 years ago, that if you had one or two, you dealt with it. It was an isolated incident. This is very common practice. So it's for a person working in a correctional facility setting, particularly in direct supervision. And for those who don't know what direct supervision is, meaning that just like my special guest, Mr. Slaughter, and I sitting together, I work in that type of environment. Well, it's nothing for, in a setting, say there's 48 inmates to a tier, 22 may now be exposing themselves to a female officer on a regular basis.
Wow.
Now, mind you, some of the content is quite gross. However, we just want to highlight and allow our viewers and listeners to get insight on what it is that your loved ones have to deal with every single day that they go to work into these environments. That they also participate in gang initiation. And in some of their gang initiation, men actually spit in the anuses of other men.
Ooh.
Yes, talking about savage life. And
that's gross.
Yes, they also take their own fecal matter, put it into bottles, and throw it on officers and other inmates as well. This is the environment.
Well, like I said, that's pretty sad and depressing. And for it to get to that level, I cannot explain it because I'm not there to see what actually caused it to get to that level. But I think one of the first steps is to, do something such as an evaluation. Come up with some kind of research, evidence-based research. Now, the issue is kind of complex because you're dealing with a gang and individual that may or may not have mental illness. So you're dealing with two different things. So Absolutely. You have to come at it in different directions. I'll say the point I made earlier about looking at some of that research that's already out there, on how to deal with those issues. I say the other thing is that you have to look at what is triggering it. What is causing them to behave this way? Many times, if you able to treat the cause,
Absolutely.
It will, in most cases, solve the problem.
Well, in talking with a lot of these young men, I've learned, and this is just from my own experience, almost going on 19 years of doing this. So I like to think that maybe I could be somewhat of a subject matter expert in this field. That you're absolutely correct when you talk about isolation. Now, when I say isolation, just because they're in a setting where there may be 47 other men who are facing crimes doesn't mean that they're not isolated. And so when we talk about isolation, we're talking about here you are once again, these group of particular demographic have been set and put into this environment and basically told to adjust and adapt. Well, if they didn't have good coping skills, which is one of the reasons why they wound up where they're at, how do you now to expect for them to accept this added pressure? How do we combat that?
Well, there's something called effective behavior management. There are tools out there that you can use. The National Institute of Corrections, and they have a lot of training manuals and tools that you could use for the specific problems. There are some called rehabilitation. So if you combine both of those together, I'm quite sure there will be some positive results. But do you have the resources, to do behavioral management and rehab these type of inmates? I mean, something has to be done.
Absolutely.
So my suggestion is to focus on effective behavioral management. But and before you could get to that point, you have to diagnose what is causing this to happen. And then you have to take away whatever it is that triggering these individuals to behave in such a way.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about long-term isolation, I think you are stating that just in fact they locked up, period.
Absolutely.
Okay. In the research, long-term isolation was referring to when you lock down 23 and 1.
Right.
So I'm not sure if any individual fit in that classification. That's why I say it's a complex issue.
Yes.
But at the same time, the same type of research that was done on long-term isolation can be done on these type of individuals. I think it'd be something in the right direction to come up with something like that to try to, evaluate these guys, come up with some type of research, and just. But you got to have individuals who have research experience. You got to have individuals who have the specialized training from the National Institute of Corrections. So once you get the right qualified individual to do these studies, then you could come up with some very good solutions that might solve some of these problems.
Now, just from my own observation, the reason that I believe that it's so complex is because a lot of these individuals are not there for an extended amount of time. Now, while some have been there 2 or 3 years, when we talk about rehabilitating an individual, this is something that takes years. You can't do it in a matter of weeks and months and think now that they're okay to be integrated back into mainstream society.
That's why I say it's pretty complex. So, but you have to come up with something.
That is true.
It might not be a rehab that you're gonna turn this person completely around, because see, when you're doing your research, you got to find out if this person has what you had an IEP when they was in grade school. IEP is individual that may have some type of disability. It could be a learning disability or behavior disability. So if some of these individuals may have had an IEP, then you look at if they were on some type of medication. Now, if they're not being properly treated, that could be triggering some of these behaviors as well.
So let's just, for a sidebar, let's think of it from this perspective. What happens when these young individuals are placed into this violent environment and they are assigned a particular life script? Society has now labeled them based on their third grade scores, and now that they have this particular life script that has been assigned to them, and it becomes difficult to be viewed any other way by teachers, by peers, by whomever. And so now they begin to live up to this particular life script, when in fact, that they may not necessarily have any mental illness, perhaps that their basic needs have not been met. And when I say basic needs, we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so there, like you said, it is a very perplexed and complex issue, and it has to be something done.
Well, let me make this point.
Sure.
You always get what you expect and think about in life.
Mm.
So if you're thinking negative, guess what? You can draw negative things to you. If you're thinking positive, you can draw positive things to you. And so sometimes you have to more or less think outside the box. Sometimes you have to redirect that thinking. I'm not saying it's an easy task.
Absolutely.
But some of those individuals, I believe, can be redirected if done properly. I'm not saying, one thing I understand is that jail is jail.
Absolutely.
Prison.
Yes.
And individuals are put there because of their behavior.
Absolutely.
So you don't expect them to change it because they come to jail or prison. No, but you don't expect them to get worse either.
Absolutely.
But at the same time is that when you do have issues and problems such as those type of behavior, I'm quite sure management are trying to address these issues. I know that for a fact. They are trying to address these issues. I'm not looking at the stats. I don't know, what has been done, so I can't speak about it. But I do know that if you're doing something to address these issues and it's not working, try something else.
You're absolutely correct in that. And I suggest, and this is just my suggestion, that since the correctional officers are the ones that deal with them directly every day, it would only be befitting that you would get input from those who work with them directly. But so often in these particular environments, there's a top-down philosophy where the information is fed and it trickles down with sometimes individuals who have never even worked in a correctional setting.
Well, and like I say, I'm not sure about that analysis because I'm not there, but I can say this, is that if you bring officers and sergeants and lieutenants and commanders and superintendents, everyone, put them on some of these committees.
Absolutely.
In each division, this is what I propose. In addition to having this so-called research done, each division should have their own committee. And their own committee should consist of officers and staff of all rank, including social workers, psychiatrists, whatever. And I think, because each division is different.
Absolutely.
And each problem is different. While all the policies and procedures are the same, but each different division is somewhat ran different. But I think by having so many committees to look at the individual problem and have a major committee who's actually dealing with the problem, and they could bring back their results to this committee, I think that might be a step in the right direction, because you have some very intelligent officers there, sergeant, lieutenant, of all ranks. I mean, and you have to, for anyone who has the desire to be a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, or that superintendent or director, those are not easy jobs. Those jobs are stressful, and it causes you health problems. So you have to actually I think anyone who wants those positions, they want those positions trying to make things better. That's what I'm looking at. So I think by forming these committees of individuals who actually want things to get better, I think you'll get some positive results as a result.
And I totally agree with you. However, I would just say that, and once again, this is just my opinion. This is not the opinion of IntellectualRadio.com. This is the opinion of Angela Champ for Sidestreets and Intersections on IntellectualRadio.com. So let me put that disclaimer out here. I think that it can't, you have to take away the politics. If you're going to get down to the nitty gritty, if we're really talking about rehabilitating these individuals so that they can integrate back into mainstream society, you have to take the politics out of it. Because once you take the politics out of it, you reintegrate the human component. And because we've gotten away from treating people like humans and we treat them just like numbers now, that's all they are.
Are you talking about staff or inmates?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Then, you're mass producing like you're in a factory. And it's going to become even more perplexed and complex to combat the behaviors of these individuals who participate in some of these abhorrent acts on one another in a correctional setting. Let's talk a little bit about, and we're going to have to make this as a series. And the reason I say that is because your book has so much information.
Right.
And there isn't a one fix all solution. Matter of fact, you propose many things. This is an excellent guide, and I think that anyone working in a correctional facility, I endorse this book. And anyone working in a correctional facility, if they're really trying to come up with real solutions, would begin to look at your framework and your outline as a way to combat some of these serious issues that myself, along with our loved ones who work in these environments on all levels, deal with. I think it's an excellent resource.
One thing about this book, I'm like to ask you a question. When you talk about acronyms, if I say DOJ, everyone know what that stand for, right?
Only if they work in that particular setting.
Right. If they work at, right. If I say FBI, they would know. If I say CPD, they would know.
Absolutely.
But if I say something like NIC, AJ, or ACA, they might know ACA. But I'm just saying that in your ideal world, in some of these, what I have known from researching and writing, a lot of jails and prisons that have, I would say, lesser problems. They all have problems. They know just as much the acronyms NIC, AJA, and ACA just as well as DOJ, FBI, and CPD. So my point is this: is that I think staff need to be more informed about the opportunities that NIC, the National Institute of Correction, AGA, the American Jail Association, ACA, the American Correctional Association, the Illinois Sheriff Association, National Sheriff's Association, they have, in Noble, of course, they have plenty of training and certifications that can assist staff. I'm quite sure that our training going on, in the department. I'm quite sure that. I'm not sure what type of training, but I'm speaking from the book itself.
Absolutely.
Is that for a fact, I know that they have training that can actually deal with some of these, issues. And so I think if you attend like conferences, like some of these national conferences, you'd be surprised at some of the resources out there, because when you go to these different conferences and you network with different people, you find out that they having some of the similar problems, and some of their problems are a lot worse than what you, like I mentioned earlier, with the prison in North Carolina. And this just happened 2 or 3 days ago.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that, but what happened is some of these, like for example, the American Jail Association, they have what you call a forum. And if you're a member, I'm not promoting any of these organizations, but if you're a member, what happens is that you can ask a question. And you got all these professionals from all over the country. If they have a solution to answer or how they deal with issues, they will respond in this form. And you could take some of those ideas and bring it back. So my only suggestion that, how to deal with this so-called savage or the issues that they are causing is you have to sometimes get out of the box and look elsewhere.
Because it is a box. And on that note, we know time, it runs by real quick. And
are we out of time already?
We are out of time. And
excuse me. Anyway, my books are available Amazon.com. Go to books, type in Elvis Slaughter, or you could call 708-365-9510, and you get an autographed copy.
Yes. And on that note, I am Angela Champ, thanking Mr. Elvis Slaughter, my former superintendent, lieutenant, sergeant, oh, no, lieutenant. And I just want to say thank you and congratulations on everything that you're doing, because you're still working behind the scenes to make sure that jails are
I'm trying to
safe.
get back. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed my work there. There was some challenging times, but you know what? I miss it a little bit. But I don't want to come back, but I miss it.
and, and on that note, I am Angela Champ for Side Streets and Intersections on IntellectualRadio.com. And just remember, if you are looking for an opportunity to host your own show, please do not hesitate to call 708-223-8953. And on that note, if you're hungry, it's because you must be fed. Until we meet again.